Evans, I'm sorry, in terms of the explanation, during the committee of the whole, it was, if the board had voted on it, then you could have had public comment. But in this situation, in the business meeting, the DeKalb business meeting, we cannot have public comment. So that's the order that, and that's according to Robert rules, and that's what we're trying to follow.
Mr. Chairman, question of privilege. I don't really want to ask any questions about the whole situation.
No, that's public comment, though, Mr.
Yes,
Mr. Evans.
I know I'm out of order.
Yeah, you are out of order.
I'll take the punishment. I know it.
Well,
but what we want to do is, if you all are going to get on track.
We're out of order, Mr. Evans. We are out of order, and according to Robert rules, and for that reason, we can have no public comment
and as soon
at
as
this
they,
time.
Take me out. What I want to make sure is that you all are going to vote.
Come on, John.
Officer.
We will resume as soon as the superintendent comes back and makes his recommendation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for visiting with us tonight. And of course, we all want to do the best for boys and girls, and we want to make the best decision that's humanly possible to ensure that all of our students receive a quality education. We all know that. So at this time, Mr. Superintendent, if we can get your comments or recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, first I want to thank you, as always, for your service, your attention to detail, and for really just the level of concern you've demonstrated to my staff, to petitioners, and stakeholders. Since coming to DeKalb as the superintendent some 8 months ago, it's been a great experience. And I have found myself surrounded by 100,000 beautiful, bright, young students, tens of thousands of parents, tens of thousands of stakeholders who are very passionate about their children and about improving the quality of education in DeKalb County. I've enjoyed the interaction, the debate, the discussion as we wrestle with how to become a high-quality 21st century public school system. DeKalb has long been an innovator. We have a long history of supporting charter schools, magnet theme schools. And I'm convinced that if we continue to work together, we will restore this district. We've come a long way in 8 months. From a catastrophic fiscal meltdown, we're very close, I hope, to being removed from probation. We are getting our fiscal house in order. But this board hired me, to the best of my human ability, as superintendent, to do what is in the best interest of 100,000 students. Not 1, not 10, not 20, not 5,000, not 20,000, not 30,000, but 100,000. 100,000. And that's a difficult task. I have studied the petition and the information that the board has provided for me and that my staff has provided for me. And to be quite honest with you, there are aspects of the proposed charter cluster that I like and quite frankly celebrate. I support innovation. I support decentralization, not just in word, but in deed. I support improving academic performance for all of our students. And by the way, although it hadn't been said tonight, the Druid Hills cluster, feeder cluster, is one of the highest performing clusters in DeKalb County today. It is not a failing cluster. It is one of the highest performing feeder clusters in DeKalb, one of the highest performing in Georgia. But within this cluster, there are tens of thousands of students who are not performing as they could. There's a disproportionate number of students who are not performing or economically disadvantaged students. I'm open. I solicit, pray for all strategies that can help us help students who are not performing as well as they can or should. That has to be the priority. Any proposal, any petition, any request, maintain the success, but more importantly, lift those who are not achieving at a high level. Now, during the session, and Mr. Lewis made pointed comments to me, which I did not respond to. At some point, we're going to have to learn to work together. I extend to the petitioners, as I always have to every citizen in this county, a true desire to work to help to improve the quality of education in DeKalb. Not just by word, but also by deed. We will continue. I personally will continue to work with you or with whoever will work with us to help to achieve the goals and objectives that you see. Sometimes it's difficult. It was a difficult day this morning when I woke up and read in the AJC on the Metro section that there were people advocating or trying to inflame the public to form mobs with torches and pitchforks. In this paper, if you don't agree with what I believe, then we should get a mob and go down there and do whatever. That's not the DeKalb we want. That's not the DeKalb we need. Not about my school, my neighborhood, my voting district, not even about my cluster. It's about all of DeKalb's children, all 100,000 of them. That's my goal, that's my mission, that's my commitment. That's where I stand. Hopefully I can stand with you, because guess what? Encompassing those 100,000 students are 5,000 who attend school in the cluster. They are my children too. It is requested that the Board of Education determine whether the charter petition submitted by Druid Hills Charter Cluster, Inc. for the proposed 5-year term complies with the rules, regulations, policies, and procedures promulgated in accordance with Code Section 22-2063 and the provisions of Code Section 22-2064 and is in the public interest. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, it is my recommendation that, one, that this cluster petition, because of potential financial impact against the district, be rejected. And it is my hope, it is my prayer that we will learn as a district, as a county, as a state, even as a nation, to sit down, to work out whatever problems we have, to improve life for all of our children, wherever they may reside in this great county.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Based on the Superintendent's recommendation, I call for a motion to deny the petition by the Druid Hills cluster. Moved by Dr. Morley, second. I need a second. Second by Dr. Irwin. Is there any discussion? Yes.
Motion is to deny. Mr. Testani, we talked about this. Would you just explain the voting procedure for this vote and then what could happen depending on which way this vote goes, just for clarity for the board and for the public? Is this working?
Make sure we all can hear.
Yes, so if a motion is pending to deny the petition, there will be a discussion on that item and a vote. If that item is approved by 5 members of the board, that is to agree that the petition shall be denied, that'll be the end of this.
In other words, the board members who are desirous of supporting that recommendation would vote yes.
No, if the motion is to deny the petition,
right,
then a yes vote to deny the petition is a vote in favor of denial.
Right, that's my point.
Okay, and so if that is successful, that will be the end of the matter. The petition would be denied. If it is not successful, if that motion fails, then there would need to be a second vote to actually approve the petition because the board is called upon to either deny or approve, and although a denial could be implicitly viewed as an approval, I think it is safer to actually have a second vote to approve it as well. So that would depend on the outcome of the pending motion.
For the sake of conversation, because we want to make sure all 9 board members understand what has been said, do we all understand what has been said? Okay. Mr. Mayfield, you have a discussion.
Yep. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Given the differences between the petition and the lead up to your recommendation, specifically as it relates to the $11 million, my question is, would you be open in consideration with the petitioners to consider an extension on the time to submit the petition should they request it, if there was a possibility that the $11 million could be resolved?
Mr. Mayfield, thank you for the question. That is totally within the purview, of course, of the petitioner. I'll restate, I have no ill will against the petitioners or anyone else, and I look forward to working with them regardless to the outcome. Mr. Testani can talk about the statute because this may or may not, depending on how the board votes, may or may not end this process.
Correct.
And I don't know whether you want to, because there could be, assuming a no vote, a period of mediation, or some other thing, or an extension if they require it. I'm just on record as saying, look, I want what's in the best interest of the DeKalb County School District. And it doesn't really matter. I will work with anyone in a respectful way, where we respect one another, where we stop the casting of the aspersions and the inflammatory language, right? And recognize that we are equals sitting at the table. I can't force you to do anything. You can't force me to do anything, but we can work together in a period of mutual respect.
So, I mean, so the answer is that you would be open
Well, I ain't really say that. I didn't really say that, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But it's up to the board. Like I'm just repeating, I'm open. Yes, absolutely. You know, I enjoy this. I love it. And we are dealing with the tough issues that must be addressed in the 21st century. There are no easy answers or solutions.
Correct.
Right? I have a history in politics, and once we recognize that no one gets everything that they want, that's just life.
Right.
And that means I'm willing to work with anybody who is willing to work with this staff and with this district. Am I answering the question properly? Yeah. And there may be other options. I just don't think, to be honest with you, that this petition that asserts itself to be a conversion but finances itself as a startup is in the best interest of a district that is struggling to right itself financially at this point in time. It's not in the public interest.
No. Is there any further discussion? Here, Mr. Orson?
See, I've been quiet for an hour and a half, so I'm feeling like I'm due. I know. Listen, my kids are probably still up watching this, wondering what the heck is going on. You know, we are at one of those things they call a tipping point, where we have to make a decision about whether we embrace innovation and change. We embrace the opportunity to say that we're going to be a leader. We rely on past notions that we've done this and that in the past, that we've offered these and those programs. But we are operating in a very different world, in a world that, in the first instance, you know, the legislature, for good or bad, has determined the parameters under which we operate, and which has made judgments about the value of schools and clusters that are called charters. And that's a very legalistic part of it, but it's not unimportant. In fact, it's kind of critical because it defines what we can and cannot decide. You know, I find it interesting that we go back and forth between this notion of what's in the interest of the school district and what's in the public interest, and I acknowledge that there is an overlap there, but the standard is the public interest. Whether we like it or not, the preservation of the school district as we know it is not one of the factors that is cited in the statute for consideration. Maybe it should be, but we're not the legislature. The legislature has made those decisions for us as to what the standards are. What drives me in this analysis, and has throughout this process, is whether we are ready to acknowledge that we have successes and we have failures, and we need strategies that are different in different places, because a strategy that has relied on a centralized notion of this is how we're going to solve things and we're going to do it from the top down hasn't worked. It's worked for some, but it hasn't worked for all. What I find appealing in this proposition is that it speaks to those notions that there is an increasing acceptance of, even to a degree by our system, of how systems should work. It looks at parent involvement as a key driver of success. We acknowledge that because the Bridge Initiative is all about that. And it pushes that notion wholeheartedly in a much smaller community and in a way to extend the reach of those who are successful to help those who are not. It talks about teacher empowerment and educator empowerment. This is a system that has paid lip service to that notion forever, and it's not alone, but it's true. Maybe change are coming, and I have, despite the differences you will see tonight, I have faith in Superintendent Thurman and his commitment to that. I do. But this is a real-world example for us to demonstrate the efficacy and potential success of doing that. We look at a group of people who have stood here and withstood a lot of criticism, but on their credentials, have stellar credentials, and have been willing to step up to lead this effort. They've gotten criticism in part because I think, and heck, I live there, it has the Druid Hills name attached to it. Somebody's got to be first. Somebody's got to take the bullet going over the hill. If it was some other cluster, maybe the response and somewhat vitriol wouldn't be the same. Maybe it would be. But the fact is that the legislature established the entity of charter clusters. Our fidelity is in implementing it. Our responsibility is in implementing it. And the fact that the Druid Hills people chose to be the first ones to do it, and maybe they regret that in some respects, looking back, but somebody has to be first because it is a change coming to not only our system but our state, because that is a legislative imperative and mandate that has been directed to us. But in the end, I think there are three things that drive me. One, it's not about us at the board. If at the end of the day there are 18 or 22 charter clusters and we as board members have less to do, I can attest that my spouse will be perfectly happy with that result. That I get home earlier, not at 11:30, but sometime earlier. What I also see, and what really I find most innovative and most hopeful, is the covenant that the group of people represented by these schools are willing to enter into. I talked about it a little bit earlier, which is that our high-performing schools in that cluster, whether it's Fernbank or it's Laurel Ridge or some of our other high-performing schools, are willing to accept the responsibility and accountability for the success of every school and every child in that cluster. That covenant that we all, I think, aspire to in different areas of our life cannot be mandated. It can only be achieved voluntarily. If we reject the notion that people are willing to take on responsibility not only for their own children, their own schools, but for those who are not as successful, where we haven't had the levels of parental involvement that we all acknowledge we would like to have and we haven't achieved. I find ironic that at times the debate has been the petitioners weren't as successful at getting people involved in schools that we know have a history of lack of involvement. And yet they made the effort. They walked the streets, they knocked on the doors, they went in the carpool lanes because they understood the importance of reaching that understanding and that covenant. We have a unique opportunity here to empower teachers, to empower educators, to empower and further the goals of our parents to help everyone who are in that defined community of the cluster. And I think it would be a shame, it would be a tragedy for us to forego that opportunity that gives us the chance to really make meaningful change and impact on the lives of every student in that cluster, and hopefully by extension, by creating a model, every student in DeKalb County.
So, Dr. Johnson, I think Superintendent Thurman and Mr. Orson have articulated well the two perspectives here, and so I call the question on the motion.
I will repeat the motion. I call for the vote to reject the petition, the Druid Hills Cluster petition, based on the Superintendent's recommendation. Is this working? It is rejected. I'm sorry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have whichever. It is rejected 5 to 4.